Welcome to the podcast. I'm Rabbi Josh. My guest today is Eddy Shuldman, a Portland fused glass artist and the co-founder of Aura, Northwest Jewish Artists, and therefore the founder of, I think, the oldest organization serving Jewish artists and bringing Jewish artists together and having a huge impact in Portland's Jewish life, therefore. In our conversation, we talk about how Eddy's work in glass emerged out of a life in education, how Jewish text and prayer become visual art, and how Aura has helped cultivate a richer, broader Jewish creative ecosystem here in Portland. We also wrestle with the question of what makes art Jewish, and Eddy shares with great honesty about process, craft, community, and the spiritual work of making. Eddy is a great conversationalist and a fabulous artist. I hope you can connect with her work and learn also about the work of Aura. Enjoy this conversation with Eddy Shuldman. Eddy Shuldman, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. You have seen the Jewish world here change a lot, and that's one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about because you, through Aura, have played a really important role in helping to cultivate arts as a way for people to connect Jewishly. So I just wanted to acknowledge that up top, but I also wanted to talk to you as an artist. So tell me, why fused glass?
I started doing glass as a way to keep myself humble as an educator. I was working for most of my career with at-risk youth. And as is true for most schools even today, or especially today, we were underfunded. And so we had to be generous. We had to teach everything. It was a frustrating job. And I vowed to myself that I would never allow myself to get bitter. And so to keep myself humble, every couple years, I would take a class at something I thought I would fail at miserably. Art was a logical place to go because I had not had any positive experiences in my life.
Yeah.
So I would do the classes and I would come back and I would tell the kids and show them my miserable failures. And it brought us to this place of understanding that learning is hard and it takes perseverance. And that's what I was trying to model for them. So I started with stained glass. And it didn't really speak to me. I got much better at it as I was teaching it to the kids. And the kids were incredible. They glommed onto it very quickly. And it's a long story, but I stumbled into fused glass, and that's where everything came alive. I could see Hebrew letters dancing.
Mm-hmm.
I could just see the images come through. And so I've been doing fused glass ever after.
That's not the usual path in for an artist, and I kind of grew up with this romantic vision of, I guess, of the artist who would just sort of like look up to the heavens and create something. But it's so much about overcoming specific technical challenges. What is a difficulty that you love in fused glass? And maybe for people who don't know what fused glass is, you can also explain it. But I'm interested in what is the uniquely difficult thing that you had to overcome?
I don't think I've overcome anything yet.
I like it.
Glass is a very fragile and kind of sturdy medium. It's all of those things. It's challenging. You can cut a straight line, go to break the glass, you score it, then you try to break it. And sometimes the glass just veers off.
Yeah.
And you don't have enough glass to finish the project and it's broken. And so what do you do?
You mean you'll score it hoping that it'll break along this curved line, and then you get to the moment and it's unpredictable and it breaks differently.
Sometimes it just doesn't go the way you want. Mm-hmm. Kiln is another issue. You fire the glass much the way you fire pottery, and some glass is finicky and sometimes it'll stick to the kiln shelf. Sometimes you get a power outage. I tell my friends I do some of my best praying when I'm doing glass.
Yeah.
And it's just like, please don't break, please come out. When you're doing stained glass, you're joining glass flat. It's just like this. And you're wrapping it in either copper foil or lead, mm-hmm. and you solder the pieces together. In fused glass, you're stacking the glass, and you can cut out intricate shapes if you've got the right equipment, or hand cut less intricate. And then you put it in the kiln and fire it to a set program based on how thick the glass is, how large the glass is. That controls it. Some people do casting where they use crushed glass in a mold, and it takes days, sometimes months, to come out with something. So it's a little different than, so it's considered warm glass. Hot glass is where you're blowing the glass and you have a furnace and you gather glass at the end of a pipe and put air into it,
Right,
and control it that way.
You know what I also discovered as I was poking around, that glass art is quite ancient. It actually goes back to Egypt and ancient Rome.
A lot of that glass was actually blown. They would use small pipes and blow. And so some of the pieces are just like this big.
Wow.
It's remarkable. I don't know how they did it other than, silica is what makes glass, and silica comes from sand. And if they had hot enough fires, they could craft with that glass.
Wait, so you've done glass travel, glass tourism? To where?
A little bit. I've seen these kinds of works in Italy, a couple of places in Croatia, England. Wow. So yeah, I'm always on the lookout at every museum. What do you have in the way of glass?
Right.
And I'm looking at, how did they do that?
Yeah.
It's remarkable.
So when you first started to create, Eddy, was it immediately Jewish in content, or did you go in and you were making other things as well? I'm just curious, because your work is so often just potently Jewish and connected to Jewish themes in a kind of explicit way. And I'm wondering how that came about.
Yeah, my first visions were Jewish visions, but I had to learn the craft of it. I had to learn how to layer the glass, how not to get the glass to bone in. So if you don't set your glass on top of it the right way, your straight line will suddenly bow in and it doesn't look very nice. The first task was learning how to control the medium to the best of my ability. I had to learn to improve my cutting techniques. I had to buy a glass saw because Hebrew letters are really a challenge to cut by hand. So I use a ring saw, and that's probably my most favorite thing. So once I felt like, okay, I can make the basic little plates and this and that's, I was really more interested in figuring out how I could express myself Jewishly. And my process when I'm doing Judaica of some sort, it's always, I'm always singing in nigun, or I'm humming a verse. I'm doing something that puts me into that place with the glass. And so it didn't happen right away because I needed to develop my skills.
How much of your work would somebody looking at it know immediately, oh, that's Jewish? Has it always been just so connected to your Jewish identity and expression?
I do garden art. I do all kinds of different things. And it's been fun at some of the Aura shows that we've had where we're selling things, and people will pick up something that, I did like a series of Torah adornments. I don't like calling them breastplates. It sounds too military for me. But so people would come by and they were not Jewish and said, what is that?
Right.
I really like it. How much is it? And it's, I don't want to sell
what are you going to do with it?
What are you going to do with it? No. But it becomes an opportunity to teach. So in that regard, people look at it and they don't know what to do with it. What's that for? My talit clips often get mistaken for sweater clips. Right. It's not 1960, so
nobody's wearing those anymore.
No, I hope not.
Yeah.
So I think the Jewish things they stand out as different. And whether folks understand it or not, I don't know. But I do think that sometimes people are drawn. Like this one time I had this amazing experience where I was on, I think it was somewhere in Seattle, and there was an art show. It was outdoor, and it was hosted by a Jewish community center or synagogue. And I had this plate, and I'm watching this woman from way down the road sort of look up. The plate caught her eye. It had metallic finish on it, and she made a beeline to it, and she picked it up, and looked at it. She was Jewish, and she said there was nothing overtly Jewish about the piece. She said, "Tell me about it." And I
Wow.
said, "Oh, I call this Min HaMeitzar." And she said, "What does that mean?" So I explained the psalm. I talked about how it's about praying to God, saying, "I called to you from these narrow places."
Right.
And she started to cry. And
Wow.
she said, "This is meant to be my plate.
Hmm.
I have," and then she proceeded to tell me this whole story of her narrow places that she had just
Wow.
emerged from. And we exchanged emails. I gave her, sent her the full
And
text
she,
with the
and she wasn't
translation.
she wasn't Jewish.
No, she
Oh,
was
she was
Jewish, but she
Jewish. Got
didn't
it.
know. Yeah, but she didn't know.
Right.
And she just, and so it was this, that's probably the most favorite part of all of the work that I do, is having these exchanges with people. I'm an introvert, actually, but when I'm in teaching mode, I can really engage with folks,
Yeah.
and being able to share the beauty of a psalm like that, and for her to connect with it in such a deep way.
Right.
It was a beshert
Well,
moment.
that's beautiful. So yeah, for people who don't know, Min HaMeitzar is a phrase in the Tehillim, in the Psalms, from the Meitzar. A Meitzar is a narrow place, a confining place, and it can refer geographically to a confining place, but also as Eddie's elucidating, like a difficult situation. So from the narrow place, I called out to God. Beautiful, beautiful. Is there a piece of yours that holds a specific piece of yours that holds a very special place in your heart? And can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I no longer have the piece. It's residing in Florida now.
Uh-huh.
And I created it during COVID. And if you recall, during COVID times, there was a lot of unrest, and Black community was really being hammered. A number of African Americans were accosted on the street. They were killed. It was a deeply troubling time. And I was contemplating, what's the Jewish response? How do we come at that?
Mm-hmm.
So I started doing some research, and I wondered, how do you say Black Lives Matter in Hebrew?
Wow.
And then I felt, okay, now I've seen all these different ways that you might say it. And how can I express that then in glass?
So before you describe the piece, what phrases did you come up with for Black Lives Matter?
Oh, the one that, let me think how to say it. The one that I landed on and I used was Afro-Americana Blut ist nicht kein Wasser,
Mhm.
which is African American blood isn't water.
So how did you navigate that linguistically? Who helped you out with that?
Good old Google.
Wow.
I just kept at it and kept digging. And then I went to Torah and started looking for what is our command? What is our obligation? And I came up with
Usually translated, do
idly
not
by.
stand idly by the blood of your neighbor. It literally just means do not stand by the blood of your neighbor. Yeah.
Right.
Of your
right.
fellow.
Those were the two things that I was playing with. And playing sounds casual. I really wrestled with this. This was most of the pieces don't come quickly or easily. I have a lot of internal struggle. So the search was the big deal, the big part of it. And then what I ended up doing was reading a lot of newspaper articles about Floyd, about all these other folks. I found a list of names, and that connected to me in terms of a yard site list. And
a list of people who had been killed,
had passed away primarily because they were Black.
Yeah.
Just for their existence as human beings who happen to have a darker skin color. And so I just read a lot of articles, and then every time I sat down to either plan the drawing or then later the cutting and the executing of my pattern, what I ended up doing was I read all of their names.
Wow.
So that I could hold them as I was doing this. And
you mean as you were creating the piece, there
Right.
was also almost like
Called out
a
their name.
liturgical recitation of the names. Wow.
So I would do that. And then the piece that I ended up creating, looks like a crime scene. It's like a chalked out body on pavement so it's a black pavement, white chalked body. And looking at it, you don't know the color of a person's skin, right? Because it's just a chalk outline.
Yeah,
So the dead
right.
person isn't the color. It's a human being,
Wow.
period.
Yeah.
That's what you know. And that's what I decided I needed to do. And then in red letters over it in Yiddish, I wrote the Yiddish
Phrase
saying
you
that
told us about. Yeah.
the African American blood isn't water.
Beautiful. What was that like for you in the process of creating, given that you added this layer that nobody else would see on the work, but that you're reciting the names? Why
Right.
did you do that? And what was that like for you?
I think I've always wrestled since I started glass with the idea that I'm an artist. I love the process. I love the engagement. It's a form of Torah study for me when I'm doing Jewish art, Jewish infused art. The process ultimately is more important than the product, which is not to say I'm not thrilled when it works out and I'm not upset when it doesn't. Of course I am. I'm human. But the process is really important to me. It's not so important to me that people see what I've gone through. I don't know how to demonstrate that. It's not important to me, but it's the process. It's another way of manifesting who I am Jewishly.
So you said the piece is in Florida. You sold it or what's happened?
Yeah. Yes, I sold it. Rabbi Goldie Milgram, actually, who has a home in Sarasota.
That's not just another rabbi. So
No,
just give people 30 seconds on Goldie Milgram.
Goldie Milgram is a disciple of Reb Salman Schachter Shlomi.
Yeah.
And she's an incredible teacher, spiritual guide, creator, inventor. She's just all over the map doing things. And she saw the piece and said she really wanted it. And
Wow.
I was
That's really
very
special.
happy to let her have it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So she has a congregation in Florida, or it's just her home? Whatever it is.
No. Her work is reclaiming Judaism.
Yeah.
And so she does a lot of bar and bat mitzvah training online. She has mentored numerous people. She's run some educational programs. She started an art guild in Sarasota. And her latest and greatest project is the accumulation of new music written, Jewish music, mostly liturgical, written and performed by women.
Right.
And so it's all being cataloged, and she's arranging concerts, and
Yeah.
eventually there will be a film.
I'm curious as to what role this art plays in your Jewish life. And I guess the reason I'm asking that is because you said it sounds like you're not 100% comfortable with the designation artist. It almost sounds like the art emerges almost secondarily from the person you are. And so it makes me curious about the process, how your creative expression is related to your Jewishness.
I'm a regular shul goer, and I'm a lay leader in a downstairs minyan that we have at my synagogue. And, sometimes a phrase just leaps out at me, so it's Shabbos, and all of a sudden I see this phrase and it takes on meaning that I hadn't contemplated before. And I get lost in that thinking for a little while. And
so
then
you'll come across a phrase from the Siddur, from the prayer book, and you suddenly have an image of, oh, wow, I could give expression to this idea.
Right.
I love that so much. There are many people for whom the process of sitting and reading in a synagogue and maybe sometimes singing just doesn't connect to their hearts. But
Right.
this idea that somebody might see or might hear the Shema or whatever it is, and suddenly there's an image dancing in their mind is so beautiful. But then you have this extra layer of you have taught yourself, I can now go home and see what I can make of that.
Right.
So is that something that really happens? Like yeah.
That's how Min HaMeitzar came about. As an example, sometimes it's a phrase in Torah. We're reading Torah, and oh, look at the imagery there. Sometimes somebody else will come and say, I want to commission a piece, and my husband's bar mitzvah portion was, and they'll tell me, can you take something out of that portion and create for that,
Right.
and so then that's my new journey, is studying that parsha and getting into it. Earlier I mentioned that I did these Torah adornments. I took 1 year where I wanted to read the Torah from start to finish, not using the triennial cycle, doing the whole thing. And I wanted to create one adornment for each book of Torah. And I wanted to
For
distill
each book of Torah or each Torah portion?
each book,
Okay, got
just
it.
each book. And I
Wow.
wanted to distill what's the message, right?
Wow.
So from Bereshit, from Genesis, for example, I distilled that whole book into Ruach Elohim, the breath of God, the Spirit of God,
So
and
interesting.
then created an art piece from that. So for each book, I tried to distill everything that I read into what is it? What are the couple words that are in that whole book that summarizes everything?
Tell me how you landed on Ruach Elohim as the expression of Genesis. And then what did you do with the image to express? What was the work that came out of that?
Um, so not the reason I came up with Ruach Elohim is because it seemed like it was the breath of God that created everything.
Yeah.
And then we start getting into the stories of our early people and everything, all the conversations God had with Adam,
Yes.
Eve, Avram, Sarai,
Right.
all of that was breath of God.
Yeah. So for folks who don't know, in the creation story, it says Ruach Elohim merachefet al hamayim, that the wind, or Ruach can mean wind, but it can also mean breath. And sometimes it's translated as spirit as well, was hovering over the waters, so that it becomes this essential moment in the creation story. But Eddy's also connecting it to when God would speak with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, or the matriarchs as well. God is using divine breath to speak. Wow, very powerful. So, what was the image that came out of that? And also, I'm interested in how did you, and maybe you can't articulate this because it's intuitive, but I'm interested in what's happening in Eddy in the process by which words become an image. How does that happen?
In this case, I think the words were separate from the image. Creation is always one of those mystical, magical moments in Torah that you wrestle with and you say, wait, how could that be? And then again, you want to hold on to it. Is this mythology? Is this real? What's the reality here? The image that I created is it's basically the world in the shape of a pomegranate that has a crown on the top. The crown has 3 pieces that makes it look like a shin, one of God's names. And the world, which is kind of misformed, has a lot of shattered glass. So I had a whole piece and I hit it with a hammer and broke it apart.
Oh, incredible.
And then fused it. So the question is this, when God, was pulling the pieces together, or was it the next thing where it was shattered and redone? So it leaves you with that question.
So it had these kind of like mystical underpinnings for you, the shattering and the coming back together again. Yeah.
Right. And then a keter, a little crown on top, and the shin, one of God's names. So it's a little bit like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
That sounds so beautiful. And I guess I envy in some ways the ability to have such a visual and creative relationship to Torah. I would say as people who love Torah and Torah reading and interpretation, there is for sure a creative process just in reading and interpreting.
Right.
But there's something about bringing that into a different mental modality, if you will, that is so appealing, and so nourishing, I would think. So with that in mind, I want to talk about the ways in which you have nourished other artists. Talk to us about this moment that gave birth to this network of artists here in the Pacific Northwest.
Another individual, Esther Lieberman, and I were at a Hanukkah fair that was sponsored by I don't know who, and we weren't very happy in that moment. I was pretty new to doing glass, and the only reason I was there was because my husband said, you have to do something with all this glass. How much more can we hold in the house?
Get it out of the house.
Right. So get it out. And
This is the mother of invention.
so I had to, sell some stuff. I was giving it away and selling and whatever I could do. And Esther was a bead artist doing beautiful jewelry and beaded artwork. And we looked around us and, there were people who were selling pewter tchotchkes from Mexico and crochet toilet paper cover,
Yeah.
all those kinds of things. And we looked at each other and said, there really should be something else we could do.
Because
It was a hodgepodge of things. And I didn't know Esther, but I'd met her at this show. And so we just went out for coffee and started talking and said, wouldn't it be cool to pull together a group of artists and see what could happen? So in a way, it started as the desire to sell.
yeah.
But, things have to evolve. You start somewhere and then you grow it and you grow it. And so she and I put our heads together. We started looking around us. And very quickly, we had 12 people, all women, which was a surprise, but 12. And we got together, and the research that I did said most Jewish art guilds collapse within the first 5 years. So we made a decision. We aren't going to open it up to a large group. Let's just learn in the next 5 years, what does it take? What does it take to put on a show? What is it we don't know? And there was a lot we didn't know. And I would love to say at the end of 5 years, we knew it all. We didn't, which is a good thing.
Right.
But at the end of 5 years, we were ready to open it up. And as we started growing up, we became very clear that there are artists who don't want to sell their artwork, but want to make art, want to be inspired. We discovered that there were a number of artists who weren't members of any other Jewish organization.
Right.
And that continued to fuel my notion that there are many ways to be Jewish.
Yeah.
There are many more ways to be an artist, but there are many ways to be Jewish and to connect. And, one of the first questions we wrestled with during the first 5 years was, what is Jewish art? What makes art Jewish? Is it the artist? Is it the content? What's there? And that continues to be one place that I think it's really fun to sit with and wrestle and chew on. But I see Aura now as an organization that offers artists a chance for socialization. They clearly have picked a Jewish art group as opposed to any number of other really great art groups in town.
Right.
And it's not just for an opportunity to sell. There's something about that Jewish connection. And so how can we fuel that? How can we nourish that? And so it becomes a gateway for some people have come into Aura and have decided, I'm going to start going to things at the EJC.
Right.
I didn't know this place existed. Other folks, it's like, my art is at a synagogue and it's on display. I should go check out a service.
I love that so much because I think here there's a commonality in the kind of work that we do. And, you guys, you've been doing it much longer, but the insight that the Jewish ecosystem includes these essential features like synagogues and the JCC and the Federation, but that list does not exhaust what is the essential part of the Jewish ecosystem. The ecosystem is all of these different ways that people are Jewish and grow Jewishly. And your guys, your path into it might have been initially just, as you said, kind of commercial, but you end up opening doors to people for whom it might be a Jewish lifeline. You mentioned this, and I'm so interested, maybe to the point of obsession about this question. What is Jewish art? How do you approach that question?
We've approached it so many different ways, and I wish I could give you a really intelligent answer. I don't have it other than we had one session where we had a guest speaker who brought in a lot of different art. One of the artists was some slides of Mark Rothko. Yeah. And of course, Rothko is Jewish. He designed a chapel somewhere. He's got these big, squares of color. And the question we were asked is, what's Jewish about all of this? And we started picking at it. And sometimes maybe the Jewishness of the piece is in the eyes of the beholder.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just way down deep. I had one artist in our group, one of our founding artists, who kept insisting that her work was not Jewish.
Right.
And so I was at her house one day looking at all her beautiful paintings, and a lot of them were flowers, a lot of life, just this lush, lively, beautiful flowers and all these different manifestations. And I said, I knew her background, but basically she had been born in Germany, and first couple of years of her life were not couple first years, but maybe she was 4 or 5 when she was in a DP camp,
Wow.
a displaced persons camp.
Wow.
And I said, what did it look like there? What does your child brain remember? And she talked about it being bleak and empty. And then I looked at all these flowers and I said, why do you paint flowers? There it was.
Wow.
And so that's not Torah, that's not prayer, but that comes from that place of
Jewish experience. Yeah.
very much so.
So how did she answer that question?
She talked about the fact that the DP camp was devoid of color.
Wow.
Everything, it was almost like a black and white photograph.
Wow.
And that she surrounds herself with flowers, and she surrounds herself with nature, and painting those things was absolutely what brought life to her.
Yeah.
And boom, the minute she said life.
Isn't that incredible? Wow.
Yeah.
What an illuminating story. I mean, I do think, I guess I do think the question of what is Jewish art is significant and important, but it sounds like maybe more important to you and to me is the question of what can happen when you bring people together who are Jewish and who have an interest in creativity. How can they nourish each other? What might come out of those conversations? And that what you just said is one of the beautiful revelations that can come from somebody who's in a Jewish context community who maybe hadn't even seen the Jewishness of her own work. And it expands the possibilities, I think, of what we think of as Jewish.
And I think just the nature of what we do, we called them critique groups, but they're really chavruta, the notion of a few people coming together to study Torah or to do something else. So the classic critique group is you gather around a painting and go, oh, that red, that doesn't belong there. That's just, and it's critical and so we created a different system. It's kind of based on something pedagogical called Critical Friends Group, where you come together and you allow the artist to ask the questions about their own work. So you're not giving them, you're not giving them critique unless they're specifically saying, what's wrong with this piece?
Right.
Rather, they're coming with a question like, I really want it to be expressing yada, and I'm not sure it's doing that. So, and then the group goes through a process.
Yeah, so it makes it more nourishing and less critical. Yeah. Yeah.
And you don't have to be afraid. And some groups have shifted away from that, and they visit each other's studios.
Yes.
Or they have a routine where each time somebody takes them on a different kind of art journey. And another group maybe just takes field trips. But we have chavruta, and I think that's the notion that most art is created privately. You're locked up in your studio, you're by yourself, and you create, and there's no one to have dialogue with. It's just you and your canvas or your clay or your glass.
Yeah.
And to have these groups means to come together, and that's a very Jewish thing, to sit and wrestle with text, to wrestle with the art.
So how long has Aura been going now? I mean, it's quite a legacy with Esther, but it's quite a legacy that you guys have gifted to this community. How long has it been going on?
I think we're about 18, 19 years.
Where's Aura headed? What are your hopes for where it?
We've just, in the last couple of years, added in writers and storytellers. And most recently, we're instituting some educational workshops of calling them art salons. And most recent one we held in one of our artists, Diane Fredgant, has created what she calls the modern Mishkan. And it was on exhibit along with an exhibit at the Stello Gallery.
Yeah.
There's a beautiful exhibit about houseless issues in Portland. And there's an apartment upstairs that was given to us to use for a week. And so the Mishkan went up. We had a Shabbat dinner in it. And then later that weekend on Sunday, we had two storytellers come and tell Jewish stories. And the artists who came to listen were given the task of figuring out how they can artistically express one of those stories.
So great.
Or an element in the story.
Yeah.
And they have from now until sometime in the fall to create that art. And then we hope to schedule something at the EJC in the fall where the stories will be told and the art goes up as a way to express a visual to these beautiful stories that are told. And it's a new experiment. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, that seems like a new approach for Aura, that you're actually cultivating people's kind of creative partnerships and expression in new ways. It's so great. I think anybody who's connected to the Jewish world in Portland has been touched by the work of Aura, whether they know it or not. And that sounds like a really exciting new direction. So, Eddy, I really appreciate the work you do, and I hope that folks will be able to go and connect with you and with your work. We will put in the show notes links to Aura and to your own your blog site, so people can track you down and appreciate the work you do. And also, of course, I want to thank you also for the work you do with Aura. So before we close, I want to just ask you to share one thing that you love these days, or you want people to know about. And then I'll ask you about your favorite Jewish food. What do you want to share with folks?
I guess I can answer both questions with one thing. One of my favorite things is baking challah. And challah is especially on my mind because Pesach is coming and I won't be able to make challah. But yeah, challah is a part of my weekly routine. I grew up with a mother who could bake like nobody's business. Yeah. And her challah was just indescribably wonderful.
Yep.
And once I retired, I was able to making challah an absolute thing. It's a scheduled thing. It's religious for me.
Right.
And I think it's a great way, an entryway into Shabbat, whether you observe Shabbat in the strictest of senses or simply you identify Shabbat as the conclusion of my week and I can enter into a new
space,
place.
Yeah. So is this a Friday afternoon ritual for you, or do you bake it or make it earlier in the week and then bake it Friday?
No, I do it all in the morning, Friday morning. When my mom became a little more fragile in her older age, she would mix the dough and then my father would come in and do the kneading.
Oh, so sweet.
And when my husband retired, which was a few years after I retired, he said, I'd like to take on your dad's role.
Wow.
And so together we do that. And it's just a wonderful way for us, I think, to begin to slow things down.
Right. And to do it together, that's such a great idea, great model for folks who can do
and then there are a couple people that we know who aren't able necessarily to get challah on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And so we always deliver one challah to each household. And that just feels, like just an extra spark. And that way we don't eat too much challah.
Yeah. By the way, the last challah this Friday coming up for a little bit, at least before Pesach. So wait, and then is this your mother's recipe that you use? Oh, I love that. I love that. Yeah. Beautiful. That's a perfect answer. It's a creative act and it's yields a delicious outcome. Eddy Shuldman, thank you so much for sharing your time with us. And I know I'll see you soon.
Great. Thank you.
All right.
And have a good pod.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.